What's up, everybody? Chester RP Church Devotional Podcast. Clint Davis, your host. Thanks for joining us. John chapter 9. We'll get started in just a sec.
Cheers each winding path I tread. Gives me grace for every trial. Feeds me with the living bread.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us again today. We are reading from John chapter 9, the man who was born blind, Jesus had healed. We pick the story up in John chapter 9, beginning in verse 13, and this is what we read. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had recovered his sight, and he said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes?" And he said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received sight. And they asked him, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" And his parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. But how he now sees we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age, he will speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." Now let's stop right there, because there's several things here that I love about this section. First of all, we note that there is a division developing among the Pharisees. This is clear evidence, right? This man was born blind. Everyone knew this man was born blind. They had seen this man all of his life as a blind man. They had seen him begging. They had seen him there asking for alms. They had seen his parents and him with his parents. They had recognized, they knew he had the challenges that come along with being born blind. And everyone knew that. The Pharisees knew that as well, but yet they chose not to believe. One of the things our minds can do in our lives is it can choose not to believe what our eyes see. And so they had decided that this man was not the guy born blind, that this was somebody different. Now, they knew good and well that this was the man, but they chose not to believe it. They chose not to see the miracle of Christ. Why? Well, one, they didn't want to recognize Jesus' power and Jesus' glory. They are so closed off to that. Two, they were so worried about their law and about the legalism that had become dominant in their sect and dominant in their lives that they were saying, this man can't be from God. He doesn't keep the Sabbath day. Now, we saw in chapter 5, if you were with us when we read John chapter 5, or if you're familiar with the story of John chapter 5, Jesus heals a man who was beside the pool of Bethesda, or beside it. He can't get in the pool, etc. And he heals him on the Sabbath day. He tells him to take up his mat and walk, and the same thing happens in Luke chapter 5, I believe it is. And the man is found, and the Pharisees find him and say, why are you carrying your bed on the Sabbath day, and why are you doing this, quote, labor, carrying your bed? A former invalid now carrying a bed, a former blind man now washing, right? And they see the evidence of the restoration of the power of God, and yet they decide they're going to choose not to believe, and they're going to critique the miracle, and they're going to critique the one who performed the miracle because he, quote, doesn't keep the Sabbath. The whole point of the Sabbath was restoration, rest and restoration. God rested on the seventh day after creating the world. He calls his people to rest on the seventh day, on the Sabbath day, to rejuvenate and to prepare them. But in the context of a relationship with him, from the Old Testament and the New Testament, it's a time of renewal and restoration to a right relationship with God. Busy week, hard labor, going about your life, doing all kind of things that have to be done in the present. Take a day on the seventh day to rest from all of that, but also to focus your attention on the glory and majesty of God and find the rest that comes from living in relationship with Christ. They missed the whole thing. They were to death about this guy washing and walking around on the Sabbath day, and worried to death about the fact that Jesus healed the man on the Sabbath. That's why Jesus came, is to bring restoration and heal. That's the first thing. Then division divides. Division arises in the Pharisees because some believe, some are like, this is truly the man. That we know this guy. Others, oh no, we choose not to believe that. What's wrong with you? So there's a division among the group. So they say, all right, here's how we're going to settle this. Let's bring his parents. His parents come, and his parents show up. And they say, is this the guy who was born blind? He said, yeah, that's our son. Yeah, he was born blind. Well, how does he see? I don't know. Ask him. John gives us a parenthetical note. And that parenthetical note says that he says, the parents say, we don't know, because they're afraid that the Pharisees already said, if you believe that Jesus is the Christ and you confess that publicly, then you'll be put out of the synagogue. This is a major issue for John's gospel. The original readers of John's gospel, their whole lives were tied up in the synagogue. It was the center of life. And they were being pushed out, meaning they were pushed away from their families. They were pushed away from social functions. They were pushed away from business opportunities. They were pushed away from any number of different things. They were pushed out of the synagogue, and therefore they no longer were connected to their community. And this was a power that the Pharisees wielded against the everyday Jew, because they recognized the Jews wanted nothing else but then to be a part of the fellowship of the synagogue and fellowship of the people, so they can have that relationship and and enjoy their lives as faithful Jews, as they were had always known, and enjoy their lives as they always had. And so these guys are making a power play, and these parents are saying he's of age because they're afraid. I'm not going to be harsh on the parents because they didn't want to be put out, but they understood what happened. And certainly in their hearts they believed, they knew that Jesus was the Christ, because Jesus is the one who had healed their son. And they believed. The challenge for all of us has always been and will always be, are we willing to make a public profession of faith? Jesus says, you confess and profess faith in me before me, and I will confess and believe and confess you before my Father. The challenge for all Christians and all people is, will we make a public profession? And there are consequences that come with that public profession. Some of them wonderful, some of them difficult. But the benefit of making that profession and standing in the presence of God far outweighs the negatives. You guys have a great day. God bless you. I shall catch up with you next time. You take care. See the miracles of God, trust Christ, and publicly profess him as Lord.
You carry me close to your heart.